What is up guys, Andy Forresty Runner here, and today I'm giving you guys my first impressions of the Hoka One One RINCON 2. So there we go, 10.5 miles done, 2,200 foot of elevation climbed for the first run in the Hoka One One RINCON 2. We put this thing in a baptism of fire. It was dark this morning, we could not hit the trails, we hit the roads, we broke this thing out. Today, as always, with all first impressions, we're going to be going through how I found the shoe, if I'm excited taking it forward, and of course what tests we have coming up for this thing. As always with first impressions though, we'll be going through the technical details first. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because not only do we do first impressions videos, we do a speed test and a long run test video combined to give you a bit more information on how this thing performed over various distances and paces. And then of course, a 100-mile update review and let you know how the shoe is performing after that distance. So if you're excited for today's video, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and we'll start with the technical overview. So we'll start off by saying that, as always, I went true to size in the Hoka shoe. So I'm a UK size 13. Hoka do from 12 upwards. It goes 12.5, 13.5, 14.5, so on and so forth. So we went 13.5 as we always do in this shoe, and it fits absolutely perfectly, albeit a little bit narrow, which we'll talk about in my first impressions. We have a 29mm stack height in the heel, 24mm stack height in the forefoot, meaning we have a 5mm heel to toe drop. And in my size, the UK size 13.5, this thing weighs in at 290 grams or 9.8 ounces. So what we'll do as always is we'll work away from the heel counter, ankle collar area, down through the tongue, lacing, upper, then we will finish on the midsole and the outsole. So let's touch on this heel counter area first. We have the pull tab that was very renowned in the RINCON 1. I think a lot of Hokas have this monstrous pull tab at the back there. Looks great in my opinion, absolutely fine. Doesn't really do a lot for me, but it's there. We've got a semi-plush, what I would call semi-plush heel counter area. It's comfortable. The actual Achilles area down the back here is very plush. I'd say that's very, very thick padding down there. But as we move around, the padding kind of thins out as we go around the edges here to that point there where it's very thin. But at the top here, we keep that thick cushioning. So I kind of was saying it's semi-plush because it's a bit of both, to be honest with you. It's cushioned where it needs to be and thin where it doesn't need to be, hence why it manages to save some weight. For a comfortable shoe, this thing gets top marks. We have a relatively thin tongue that is not gusseted, so it's completely detached from the side walls of the shoe, which is quite a rarity, I guess, in this day and age, because this year we've seen a lot of gusseted tongues, semi-gusseted tongues. When I say gusseted, if you don't know what that means, it means it's just the tongue is attached to the side wall, so it has that wrapping sensation over the top of your midfoot to hopefully give you a better lockdown. But the laces do that perfectly in my opinion. It's just a bog standard simplistic lacing system, nothing fancy, no fancy overlays, just gets the job done. And actually it works with the tongue really nicely. We've got a bit of material here which just holds the tongue to the laces nicely, and that combined with the lacing just got me a really good lockdown this morning. We'll talk about the narrowness that I mentioned in a bit because we've laced this shoe. In fact, actually, let's touch on that now. So what I've had to do, because this is a narrow shoe, and we'll talk about the downside of the shoe with that shortly, is I've had to lace the shoe a little bit wider at the bottom to give some slack here, so that when my foot lands and the material splays out either side for my feet to fit, the lace has a bit of give in it to allow the material to go with my feet. And actually, if you have a relatively wide foot like I do, it works just fine. If you have a really wide foot, the shoe just will not work for you. But that's what I've had to do with the laces, and then it gets tighter as we go up the top. Moving on to the upper, we have what they're calling a sandwich knit upper. I have no idea what that means. I'm assuming there's a couple of layers there meshed together, which is meant to be super breathable. I'll be honest with you, After one run, I'm not really able to give you my honest feedback on that. It was a warm morning, my socks were thick, my feet did not overheat, so that's a good sign, I'm guessing. But it is the main difference between the original Rincon and the Rincon 2. Still a great feeling upper, nice, it does feel breathable, nice and a bit of stretch in there, which allows someone with a wider foot to fit in this narrower shoe a little bit better than if the material was completely rigid. And that is just a one piece that goes all the way around, no fancy overlays, just we've got this print on here that goes around the back and down the side with their logo on, and then the time to fly symbol there. That's it for the upper. Midsole is a one-piece EVA midsole. We all know about the windsole. We'll talk about that very shortly in my first impressions. But from a starter, it is very, very comfortable. It takes a couple of miles to break in. Very similar to the Atreyu in terms of getting out there thinking, oh, this is a bit firmer than I remember the original Rincon. Then by the end of the run, you're thinking, this is the Rincon I remember. So it does take a few miles to break in. Luckily, we were out there today for 10 miles. Hour and a half climbing up and down those hills allowed us to break in the midsole pretty quickly. And then moving on to the outsole, again, tons of exposed midsole just to save weight, and some strategically placed rubber outsole in the high wearing areas to hopefully stop degradation of the midsole too badly. And one thing you'll notice with the Rincon is that it kind of sheds a layer of skin. It looks terrible. This has had one run in it and it's going to start to churn up rather quickly, but all that is it's aesthetically not good on the eye. But in terms of performance, it doesn't do anything to it. It just seems to literally shed a layer of skin. Then after about 50 miles, all that settles down and then it starts to look just worn rather than flaky bits everywhere. So that is it for the tech. So on to the juicy details. My first impressions, how did I find the shoe? Well, for those of you original subscribers, maybe not original, but for those of you that have been hanging around for at least a year, you'll know this shoe was my shoe of 2019. There's just one big downside to the Rincon. You all know what it is. It is the durability of the midsole. I got about 150, 160 miles out of my original Rincon, feeling absolutely amazing, setting a 5k PR of 16:58, setting a half marathon PR of 1:20, whatever it was at the time, in this shoe. No carbon plates required. Meta rocker in this forefoot area to aid you in your foot strike, to increase running efficiency, and it certainly does that. It's such a great lightweight shoe, and I loved this thing for racing. In the age where everyone was wearing the 4% and the next percents was quite a new thing, I was rocking the Rincons and they did me amazing. Sadly, after 150, 160 miles, the midsole completely flattens out and it started to give me quite a bit of pain. I persevered to about 220 miles, 230 miles, and then had to retire the originals because every run I was doing, I was getting shin pains, foot pains. The midsole just completely died on me. I think that lifespan is going to depend on the weight of the runner, the height, the size, the build. I'm a taller runner, 6'6". A lot of you smaller runners out there will probably get a few more miles out of yours than me. I am 86 kilos, roughly 6'6", putting a lot more weight through these shoes than maybe some of you out there. So I think I'm going to burn through the midsole a little bit quicker. I anticipate some of you lighter runners out there might be able to get 200, 250 without noticing too much of a difference. But I think a lot of us know that it is well below 200 miles. Other than that, I have to say that after the first couple of miles, when the EVA broke in, when the midsole broke in, it was just like rolling back to last year, running in my favourite shoe of last year. If you ask me, why do you love this shoe so much if it breaks down so quickly? Because do you know what? Those 150 miles that I get out of this shoe are some of the best 150 miles that I will run in any shoe of the year. And the reason that the Nova Blast will pip this thing to the post for shoe of the year, I'm not saying that it is, because the speed is right up there, is the durability. It has to come into play, but in terms of the enjoyment of the ride, this thing is right up there. Just one point to note, I guess, as I mentioned before, it is a narrower shoe, so despite Hoka's having a nice wide base, you get that stability, which is good. It is narrow. Now, as I showed you in the beginning, I laced it up so I had a bit of slack here. My foot could stretch. It worked absolutely fine. I get no rubbing down the lateral and medial and lateral sides. I think that's right. I'm looking at it backwards. I get no rubbing there, which is great. If you have really wide feet, this shoe will just not stretch enough for you, sadly. The material is a bit stretchy, but it's not stretchy enough. So just bear that in mind. Other than that, what you're going to get is a lightweight package that can do everything. This is another jack of all trades. This is another fuel cell prism. This is something that you can do everything in. And my preference last year, again, was speed work and racing in this shoe. And I would not hesitate for a non-carbon plated option. If you wanted a racing shoe, then I'm going to be honest with you, look no further, because this thing is absolutely great. You'll get about the same durability for a racing shoe out of this thing as you would with another one, but it's so worth it if you don't want to look down the carbon plate option. So what I'm going to do is put a few more miles into the shoe, get the speed test and long run test done. That might be a couple of weeks time, because obviously I have a 4-hour long run this weekend prepping for the Brecon Beacons mountain marathon, all up and down trails, and this shoe is just not going to be suitable. But I'll try and take it out the following weekend on something a little bit more runnable. I'll get a speed test done next week in the shoe, some of the marathon training stuff, and I'll report back with my speed and long run test, and then of course take it all the way to 100 miles and give you my feedback. In between that, we will get a comparison out between the Rincon 1 and the Rincon 2, because I do expect that despite what everyone else is saying, that it's just the upper that's changed, I'm going to feel some differences between the two shoes. I just need to get some more miles in them to register how this is feeling and try and remember how the Rincon 1 felt like. Overall though, a solid start to life with me. I can't believe I've left this shoe in its box for over a month. This thing has been sat here waiting patiently to be running, and I finally broken it out. So there we go, that's it for my first impressions. Let me know in the comments below if you have the Rincon or the Rincon 2, how you're getting on with them, and then more importantly, how much life did you get out of the shoes? Let me know in the comments below, it'd be great to hear from you. So if you're excited for today's video, guys, well, actually you're not excited, you've heard that already. If you enjoyed today's video, please make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Until then.